Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. James Mitchell was a man obsessed with the image he projected to the world. As the head of a large company and a regular at social gatherings, he liked everyone to admire his success, but not his wife. Naomi, his partner of 6 years, was black, beautiful in her own way, but simple, elegant without ostentation. For James, his discretion and his skin color were an obstacle to the social perfection he sought to display. Every event was a parade of appearances for him, and Naomi, whom he secretly loved but considered unsuitable for the world he frequented, had to remain in the shadows. That evening, for the annual high society gala, James had made a humiliating decision: he would not take Naomi. Instead, he would choose Victoria, his blonde secretary with the perfect smile, a woman he believed would represent the ideal image by his side. Naomi, hurt, said nothing. But beneath her outward calm, a quiet strength was brewing. She knew her dignity didn't depend on James's gaze, or that of others. And what he didn't know was that this gala was about to become the scene of a revelation that no facade, no lie, could hide. The grand gala hall shone with 1,000 lights, the crystal chandeliers reflecting the elegance and pomp of the guests. James Mitchell, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, stood tall with a satisfied smile. Beside him, Victoria, his secretary, shone resplendently in a shimmering gown he had chosen for her. The two seemed like the perfect couple, at least to the world. The guests greeted them with handshakes and polite compliments. James savored every admiring glance, every whisper praising his companion's impeccable selection. Victoria, though a little intimidated by the attention, basked in her sudden recognition, unaware of the shadow hovering behind the moment. But just when he thought he had the situation under control, an unexpected presence turned heads. Naomi entered. Her simple yet perfectly elegant black dress contrasted with the glitz and ostentatious luxury of the room. Her upright posture, confident smile, and effortless aura immediately captivated attention. Conversations stopped, and whispers emerged. "Who is she?" James felt a pang of worry. The woman he'd been trying to hide had just eclipsed his secretary and shattered the carefully constructed facade. Victoria, on the other hand, felt her sparkle falter in the face of Naomi's magnetic presence. All eyes were now fixed on her, and James began to realize that this gala wouldn't go as he'd imagined. Naomi walked calmly through the main hall, her sure footsteps echoing lightly on the polished marble. Each movement exuded a natural elegance, far removed from the artifice and glitz that filled the room. The guests, surprised by this unexpected appearance, began to whisper among themselves, "Who is this woman?" James, sensing the atmosphere changing, felt his smile freeze. He had planned a perfect dinner with Victoria, where all eyes would admire his good decision. But Naomi had just upset all his plans in an instant. Victoria, sitting with James, watched the scene with growing discomfort. She realized that, despite her expensive dress and carefully crafted smile, she had no presence compared to Naomi. The guests approached, intrigued and drawn by the natural charisma of this woman who seemed to radiate effortlessly. Naomi, aware of the attention she was attracting, was not intimidated. She greeted the guests politely and engaged in conversation with influential leaders, answering questions with intelligence and humor. The murmurs turned into compliments. "What a presence! She's incredible." James felt panic rising within him. Everything he had wanted to hide from the world had just been revealed. Naomi, the woman he had ignored in order to shine brighter, was the true star of the evening. Victoria, meanwhile, looked at Naomi with a mixture of admiration and unease. In a corner of the room, James painfully realized that he had underestimated his wife's quiet strength. And tonight, he would learn, the hard way, that elegance and dignity cannot be manufactured, they must be owned. As James desperately tried to divert Naomi's gaze to Victoria, he realized the situation was completely out of control. Naomi, calm and confident, moved among the guests with natural ease. Every smile she offered, every word she spoke captivated attention. The guests, fascinated, approached her to ask questions, completely ignoring James and Victoria. James tried to intercept her, whispering to Victoria, come on, we need to talk to these people before they notice her too much." But a nervous Victoria realized her presence was no match for Naomi's aura. Every compliment James had hoped to receive for choosing the perfect secretary was now backfiring on him. Naomi struck up a conversation with one of the event's key patrons, speaking intelligently and elegantly about her philanthropic projects and her work in sustainable fashion. The guests were captivated. James felt his jaw tighten. He had underestimated his wife to the point that what he had planned as a perfect social display had turned into a public humiliation. Victoria, flushed with embarrassment, realized she was merely a prop at the party, a role Naomi effortlessly eclipsed. James, on the other hand, felt powerless. Every smile Naomi received, every compliment he received, was a thorn in his pride. And just as a photographer approached to capture the couple of the year, Naomi stepped forward alone, capturing the flash of the cameras. All eyes turned to her, and James knew, with bitter certainty, that the facade he'd built had just crumbled. As the evening progressed, Naomi continued to radiate. Guests approached her, curious and admiring, intrigued by this woman they had never seen before. Her intelligence, grace, and eloquence captivated everyone, leaving James and Victoria in the shadows. A prominent journalist assigned to cover the event approached James and Victoria for an interview. James, uncomfortable but trying to keep up appearances, introduced Victoria as his gala companion. Before he could say anything else, Naomi calmly approached and introduced herself with a confident smile. "Good evening, I'm Naomi Mitchell," she said in a clear, calm voice. "I work in sustainable development and humanitarian work, and I support several social projects." The surprised journalist immediately recognized Naomi. She was known not only for her influence in philanthropy, but also for her innovative projects in the ethical fashion sector. Cameras flashed around her. The guests whispered in astonishment, "Is that Naomi Mitchell?" James felt his face flush. The entire room, including Victoria, was now looking at him with a combination of surprise and curiosity. His secretary, who thought she would shine at his side, was completely overshadowed. Naomi, serene, captivated everyone's attention, transforming a simple gala into a scene where James appeared for the first time as a man embarrassed by his own choices. Victoria clumsily tried to regain attention, but James realized with bitterness that her facade had been completely shattered. Naomi, effortlessly and with dignity, had taken control of the evening. James felt a lump of shame rise inside him. Every smile he directed at Naomi, every word of admiration for her, was a stab in his pride. He had thought Victoria would be the star of the evening, but it was Naomi who was capturing all the attention. Guests approached to compliment Naomi, asking questions about her projects, her career, and her philanthropic commitment. James, who tried to place Victoria at the center of the conversation, encountered general indifference. Even Victoria, aware of Naomi's overwhelming presence, lowered her eyes and remained silent. One of the guests, an influential business executive, addressed James with a polite but ironic smile. "Your wife is fascinating. I didn't know she was in this field. How lucky you are." James stood frozen, unable to respond. Every eye in the room seemed to be judging his vanity and his choice to hide Naomi. The whispers turned into audible comments. He really thought he could hide her? Naomi, on the other hand, didn't bat an eyelid. Her presence alone revealed James's superficiality and arrogance. His natural dignity shone through in every gesture, every word, while James became a caricature of a man obsessed with appearances. Victoria, trying to smile, felt the coldness of reality. She was only a stand-in, a mask James had used to hide his own shame. And for the first time, James understood how much he had underestimated his wife's strength and charisma. As James stood frozen, unable to regain control of the situation, Naomi spoke to the guests calmly and confidently. Her clear, steady voice cut through the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, elegance and dignity cannot be bought. They are not worn like a dress or a piece of jewelry, they are lived and reflected in our actions and our presence." The guests, impressed, turned to her. Naomi continued. "Tonight, I came not to upstage anyone, but to remind everyone that true beauty and respect do not depend on the image others project or the artifice we choose to display. It is our values, our strength, and our integrity that set us apart. Each word fell with precision, touching the guests and making James blush with bitter humiliation. Victoria, who had thought she could rival Naomi, lowered her eyes, knowing that no amount of ostentation could ever match such natural poise. Applause erupted from the room, and Naomi smiled serenely, without a hint of malice, leaving James and Victoria completely overshadowed. James felt his pride shattering piece by piece. He had tried to hide his wife to appear perfect, but in reality, she was the true star of the evening. Naomi, majestic in her simplicity, had transformed a moment when she should have been relegated to the shadows into a public lesson in elegance, strength, and dignity. James finally understood that no social facade could compete with the grandeur of a woman who knows who she is. Back at their house, James remained silent, his expression closed. Every detail of the evening came back to him, the admiring glances turned toward Naomi, the whispers, the photographer's flashes, and his own embarrassment. He had thought he had control over the image, but he had been completely eclipsed. Naomi, calm and collected, showed no resentment. She put down her coat and sat down, letting James take in her behavior. After a long moment of silence, she spoke softly. "James, I never needed to shine by your side to be myself. It's not what you look like that matters, but who you choose to show the world and love every day." James looked down in shame. His superficial choices, his vanity, and his shame at his wife's appearance were now returning to him with a force he couldn't ignore. He had tried to replace Naomi with a perfect, artificial image, and reality had just punished him. Naomi continued, without raising her voice. "If you had valued me for who I am, you wouldn't have needed to hide our identities from others. True strength doesn't lie in appearance, James, it lies in respecting and loving those around you." James, deeply moved, finally felt humility settle within him. For the first time, he understood the greatness of Naomi and the smallness of his own superficial concerns. This evening, which was supposed to be a social triumph for him, had turned into a lesson in humility and respect. Naomi, always dignified and luminous, smiled, leaving James to ponder his wounded pride and how lucky he was to share his life with such an exceptional woman. In the days that followed, James reflected long and hard on what had happened at the gala. The shame he had felt had given way to a profound realization. He had underestimated Naomi, tried to disguise his worth and play up appearances. But now he finally saw the truth. Naomi, for her part, continued to shine with her charisma, dignity, and natural elegance. She never sought to humiliate James, but her mere presence and quiet strength were enough to make him understand the value of respect and true love. James began to change. He stopped caring about the superficial opinions of others and began to value Naomi for who she truly was, a strong, brilliant, and worthy woman. He now publicly supported her, acknowledging her successes and proudly sharing her philanthropic and professional endeavors. The couple's relationship was transformed. Naomi and James learned to respect and love each other without pretense or shame. James understood that true greatness was not measured in costumes or impressed guests, but in the strength, dignity, and worth of those we choose to cherish. And so, what began as an evening of humiliation became a lasting lesson. True elegance and beauty come from within, and no one can hide or diminish them.